Galen, my whole life I've been interested in the strange things of brain and mind and consciousness and theology and figuring out what it's all about. And you have this position that, at least in recent times, has been somewhat underappreciated, is one word, ridiculed might be another, and that is panpsychism. What is panpsychism and how can you justify it?
Well, panpsychism is first go, it has many varieties, is the view that everything is in some way mental or experiential.
And when you mean everything, you mean everything.
I mean everything.
I mean every
Yes.
atom in this table. Is it every part of an atom? Does it go to the gluons and the electrons? Everything that exists.
Yeah, I mean, one way to get there quickly, as it were, is say, it's quite widely agreed that everything physical is just energy, or is some form of energy.
Okay,
so
there's fields, yeah.
And then the next point is that although science consists of volumes and volumes of equations, and these equations describe the structure of the energy patterns we find out there, but they don't tell us the intrinsic nature of that very energy. So I'm just saying, I think it may be that the intrinsic nature of that energy is experiencing or experientiality.
Okay, so I just want to understand what that means. Does that mean that if we have whatever that energy is, that we can't access the more than structure?
Yep.
I see that. And so the reality we don't know, but you're saying that reality has an experience component, or you're saying that the totality of that is experience?
Well, those are two varieties of panpsychism. I mean, one might say that, every particle has a non-experiencing aspect, but also has an experiencing aspect.
Okay.
That would be one form of panpsychism.
Kind of a weak point of it.
Weaker form. The other one would say there is the energy which is everything. Everything is made, in some sense, wholly out of energy. That just is nothing but experientiality.
And does that move the pure panpsychism, the strong form, does that move in the direction of so-called idealism, where everything is mental?
Well, I have a little trouble with the word idealism because I prefer to say it's a form of mentalism. But broadly, as the word idealism is usually used, broadly speaking, yes, it does. But really, the question is, why am I saying this?
Yeah, right. Well, let's get to that. Right.
Well, I think step one is I want to be a monist. I don't want to be a dualist. I think that there's just one kind of stuff in reality. So one route is closed to me. Next step is we know that there is experiencing. We just, in our daily experience, we have it all the time. Visual experiences, auditory experiences, colors, sounds, sights, and smells.
So we can't get rid of that.
We know we have that. Now, if you're a monist, I said I want to be a monist, but I also want to be a materialist or physicalist. But by the time I've finished, not many people are going to think that I'm still using the word materialist or physicalist in a way that they accept. So we know we've got this stuff. I want to be a physicalist, so I've got to say it's physical. So now I have the problem. Going back to the standard picture of the physical is that it's radically, fundamentally non-experiential in nature. But I know that some of it...
table.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, a panpsychist does not have to think that a table is conscious, and I do not think that.
Okay, good.
So we've got this matter which is in its fundamental nature totally non-experiential. That's the standard picture. We've got some matter that is feeling. How do we get from one to the other? Mm-hmm. Well, you have to postulate something called radical emergence. You have to say that when you put these fundamentally, utterly non-experiential bits together in certain complicated ways, like they are put together in brains, for example,
right,
you get bright red colors and sounds of trumpets and all that. And here I am just down to an intuition. My intuition says there is no way in which you can just put completely non-experiential things together to cross into this other realm. So, if you can't do that, some of the experiencing stuff must be right there down at the bottom, right at the beginning.
It certainly...
That's the argument.
It certainly makes sense that you have a very clear position. Either the physical is going to have this radical emergence in the complexity of the brain, and an analogy would be that I would use would be an atomic bomb. You could have pieces of plutonium or uranium-235 pure, and it would be radioactive. It would kill you if you got near it, but it would be fairly inert. But if you put enough of it there, just an extra tiny bit, you have an atomic explosion.
Sure.
So that is, in a sense, a radical emergence without any postulation of anything beyond the physical world. Why wouldn't an analogy like that work in the brain?
Well, I would say that analogy, it's a huge thing that happens, but it's nothing like the case I have in mind, because everything you had before can be described in terms of shape, size, position, motion, charge, whatever.
Yes.
The whole explosion can be explained wholly in those terms. In the case of feeling, you've gone from these standard terms, shape, size, motion, charge, to something that's completely heterogeneous. So that's the intuition. It's not, I would say, it looks like a good analogy, but it isn't, because this is something much, much more dramatic.
You've used the expression, which I find fascinating, a fundamental dualism, because you have this experience and non-experience thing, but in a monistic, one physicalist framework.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what you're trying to do.
Yeah. I mean, I think I probably should say again that when I use the word physicalist, people are going to be taken aback, because what I'm advocating is panpsychist physicalism, which sounds to some people like a contradiction in terms.
Let me ask you this. If panpsychism is off the table, and I'm telling you, you can't use that as an explanation. And so what you have left, you have two sides of this equation. You have the internal feelings, the experience of our phenomenology internally, and you have the pure physicalist world. But I'm not allowing you to go to panpsychism. What do you do? Would you claim that ultimately the physical world will explain the feelings through a radical emergence, which is the only possibility the physical world do, or would you go to dualism?
No, I mean, I would regard... radical emergence is so ruled out for me that I'd have to go to dualism. But of course, so at that point, I inherit all the famous problems of dualism.
Right.
I mean, first among which is, how on earth do these two different substances causally interact when you have to have an account of that? And it's worse than that, because a lot of people would say that causal interaction is already a sufficient condition of being same substance. So I would give up more or less at that point.
Yeah. Well, what I find fascinating is that the panpsychic position, when you say it, can elicit snickers, because it just seems so ridiculous that everything is alive. Right. It sounds like we should all dance in a circle or something. But then when you really explore the alternatives, you begin to not ridicule it so much, because it when you begin then to explore each of the alternative explanations, you run into serious problems.
Yeah. If my opponent will give me two things, I'll be able to run the argument. The first thing is, let's say that they're going to say materialism is true, which lots of people say. Second is they're really realists about experience, feelings. As soon as I've got those two things, I can run the argument.
And that's why you call yourself a realist monist.
Yes.
Because one thing, but the realist point of view, you have the reality of experience.
Yeah, a real materialist has to accept that. Otherwise, they've gone off the map.